So the interview's got to be a balance between them interviewing you and you interviewing them, although some departments have a practice of swaying more in one direction than the other. Now, most departments have adopted a more sophisticated attitude towards interviews in the last few years. So they'll have sat down, the committee will have sat down, and a lot of this is as a result of human rights legislation in Canada at any rate. They will have sat down, worked out a predetermined set of questions and assigned them to people who are on the committee, so that when you get to the interview, everybody will be asked, who's interviewed will be asked the same question by the same person. On the other hand, I encountered one department a couple of years ago who didn't have a committee interview as part of the process. That, in fact, they interviewed people two-on-one at various points throughout the visit, and then they compared notes afterwards. I told them afterwards I thought that was a violation of human rights, but I don't know if they've changed their practice. Don't let the interview fall into the trap of being all about them. If you are a star, they'll be working so hard to sell you sometimes that they won't leave you enough time to talk. And if that happens, once you've left, they'll go, gee, that person's such a star, but on paper, but you know, they didn't really perform in person. So you're going to have to manage that interview process a little bit. On the other hand, you can fall into the trap of you're doing all the talking and they're not doing any of it. And that's problematic as well. You need to have an opportunity to ask them questions. You need to give them a sense during the interview of what it is that you bring to this department. What gaps do you fill? How do you complement an existing research group? Watch the tangents that happen in an interview. Sometimes if there's an interview committee with some strong personalities in it, like there are ever interview committees without search committees without strong personalities in them, there'll be somebody who'll take you off on tangents. And that's okay if that happens a little bit. But if it's continuing to happen, you'll never get to the core of what they wanted to ask you and what you have to say. There may also be a situation in which one member of the committee dominates the questions. See what you can do to deflect that attention a little bit. They may ask you some inappropriate questions. Usually those won't happen in the course of an interview. They might happen over dinner at some other time. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. You do not have to answer questions that are illegal or inappropriate to ask, but you do have to think of some smart comebacks or way of deflecting the attention from those particular questions. My hope is that none of you will be asked those. Yeah. Do you think your husband will have trouble finding work here? Do you think that, do you think that as a gay person you'll be uncomfortable in our Catholic institution? Have you thought about what you'll do about daycare? This can be to somebody who's who's on the job market while they're pregnant. Yep.
If you're female, are you planning on having children?
Yep. And I thought those questions had disappeared, but I still hear a few stories every once in a while, not from my own institution, about people being asked those questions. So, eye contact. This is very cultural, but I would say if you're going for a job interview at a Canadian or American university, I'll speak to that first. Eye contact is really important. Practice it. You can practice it here right now. While I'm talking to you, if I see that you're really looking intently at me, I'm going to zero in on you. When you ask a question, I'm going to pay more attention to it. The more eye contact you have with members of the committee, the better off you are. You can actually get someone to start paying attention to you by, even if they're not making eye contact with you, really zeroing in on them. And it actually works. It works with everybody except people who are sleepy. And I have seen people sort of nod off, especially if an interview is right after lunch. You want to be engaging and engaged. I mentioned before, don't be slick, though.